For the last 25 years, this movie has sat at number 1 on IMDb's top 250. Not number 2, not top 5, number 1. The Shawshank Redemption. Rated higher than The Godfather, higher than Schindler's List, Pulp Fiction, and every other film ever made. According to the internet, this is peak cinema. Now watch this scene. Andy Dufresne and his prison buddies are sitting on a rooftop drinking ice-cold beers in the sunshine, like they're at a company picnic. This is supposed to be Maine's toughest, maximum security prison. These are convicted murderers. Now watch this. Actual prison footage. Notice something? One of these feels like prison. The other feels like summer camp with better lighting. And that's The Shawshank Redemption in a nutshell. It's not cinema. It's a bedtime story for adults who can't handle real movies. A fairy tale dressed up in prison grays and Morgan Freeman's soothing voice, designed to make you feel warm and inspired without ever making you uncomfortable. It's the Hallmark card version of a prison drama. Pretty, safe, and completely dishonest about what it's actually depicting. But here's what nobody wants to say out loud. The Shawshank Redemption isn't great. It's just easy. Easy to like. Easy to quote. Easy to feel good about. It doesn't challenge you. It doesn't disturb you. It just wraps you in a warm blanket of manipulated emotions and tells you everything will be okay if you just have hope. Well, I'm about to be that cynic. Because The Shawshank Redemption has more plot holes than Andy's tunnel, more cardboard characters than the warden's fake books, and more emotional manipulation than a Hallmark Christmas marathon. Let's pull back the curtain on the Shawshank fraud. Let's start with the most fundamental problem. The Shawshank Redemption is supposed to take place in a maximum security prison, one of the toughest facilities in Maine. And yet, from the moment Andy arrives, Shawshank feels less like a house of horrors and more like a slightly pessimistic community college. The inmates play baseball, they have movie nights, they build a cozy library with classical music. By the end, they're running a book club. One critic nailed it. The film hides a warm and cuddly fantasy about prison life behind sleek brutality. Let's talk about the so-called threat, the Sisters. This gang led by Boggs is supposed to embody prison danger. Except, Boggs looks like a ginger you could take in a fight. There's a scene where they literally lie in wait for Andy outside a movie screening, just standing there in the shadows like cartoon villains. Once Hadley beats Boggs into a coma, the sisters just disappear. Problem solved. No retaliation. No escalation. And the other inmates? Everyone's a sweetheart. Red is wise and warm. Brooks feeds a bird. They're so nice you forget they're murderers. One reviewer said Darabont envisioned them as swell and soft-hearted guys probably put away for overzealous toenail clipping. Compare this to any realistic prison drama. In those stories, prison is suffocating, brutal, constant survival. In Shawshank, the biggest problem is not enough library books. And here's where we need to talk about Roger Deakins. Roger Deakins is one of the greatest cinematographers in film history. He makes everything he shoots look like a painting. And that's exactly the problem. He makes the suffering look prestige. Look at the sewage pipe escape. Andy crawls through 500 yards of shit-smelling foulness. It should be the most revolting moment in the film. But when Andy emerges, he isn't covered in the reality of human waste. He's covered in cinematic mud that looks more like chocolate syrup than sewage. And then the rain starts. It's a perfectly timed divine baptism that washes him clean in seconds. The lighting is cinematic, the framing is heroic, and the music is swelling. The movie is terrified of making you actually feel disgusted. In Shawshank, every uniform is perfectly pressed. The lighting is always golden hour, and even the rapist characters are treated more like plot devices than a genuine threat. You aren't watching the horror of the American penal system, you're watching a themed attraction. In film school, the first thing they teach you is the golden rule. Show, don't tell. The Shawshank Redemption doesn't just break this rule, it incinerates it. If you took away Morgan Freeman's voice, the movie would be incomprehensible. Watch any major emotional beat. Red is right there in your ear.
My first impression of the man was bereaved. I wish I could tell you that Andy life gone my way.
Sweet nothings about hope and the human spirit. He is essentially human subtitles. He tells us Andy was quiet and different. He tells us hope is a dangerous thing. He even tells us the inmates felt like free men while drinking those beers.
We sat and drank with the sun on our shoulders and felt like free men.
But here's the problem. If the scene were actually good, you wouldn't need him to tell you that. We call this voiceover hypnosis.
To me, it's just a made-up word. A politician's word.
Morgan Freeman's voice is so soothing and authoritative that it tricks your brain into thinking you're watching deep storytelling. But it's actually a narrative cheat code. Frank Darabont didn't trust the actors or the visuals to convey the weight of 20 years in prison. So he hired the most comforting voice in Hollywood to explain it to us like we're 5 years old. True masterpieces like 2001, A Space Odyssey, or There Will Be Blood let the imagery breathe. Shawshank never stops talking because it's terrified that if there's 5 seconds of silence, you'll realize there's no substance underneath. It's not a movie. It's a high-budget audiobook with B-roll. Great films have complex characters, morally ambiguous people who feel real, who surprise you. The Shawshank Redemption has good guys and cartoon villains. That's it. Black and white, zero nuance. Let's start with Andy, because he might be the most uninteresting character in the entire film. Andy is a statue. He enters Shawshank as a noble, hyper-intelligent banker, and he leaves as a noble, hyper-intelligent banker. He doesn't have a character arc. He has a purity marathon. We call this the prison Jesus problem. Andy isn't a human being. He's a middle-class savior fantasy. He's smarter than the warden, more noble than the guards, and more cultured than every other inmate. He spends his time teaching high school equivalency, building libraries, and playing Mozart over the speakers, like a secular missionary civilizing the savages. He is magically immune to the psychological rot of 20 years in solitary confinement. He's like a software update running on an old, broken operating system. The movie suggests that Andy is special not because of his innocence, but because of his class. He's the banker. The film subtly tells us that the other inmates belong there, but Andy is a tragedy because he's educated. He never makes a mistake, never has a moment of genuine moral weakness, and never loses his cool. But a character who can't fail isn't a character. He's a motivational poster that learned to walk. Let's talk about the antagonists, because they're genuinely embarrassing. Captain Hadley beats people and complains about taxes. That's his entire character. Warden Norton quotes the Bible and launders money. That's it. No complexity, no inner life. When your villains are this shallow, tension evaporates. They're not people. They're cardboard cutouts standing in the way of the hero's triumph. But it's not just the villains. Red is supposedly a murderer, but you'd never know it. He's too warm, too safe, too much like everyone's favorite uncle. And here's the kicker. This is actually Red's story. Red narrates. Red has the character arc. Red changes. Andy is just the catalyst. He's passive for most of the film. And after Andy escapes, the movie literally becomes about Red's journey. Andy barely has 3 memorable moments: the beer scene, the opera scene, the escape. Without flaws, without mistakes, without genuine emotional journey, Andy Dufresne is less a character and more a concept. And concepts don't make compelling protagonists. They make inspirational Instagram quotes. If Shawshank's unrealistic prison is the foundation of the fraud, then its shameless emotional manipulation is the construction. This movie doesn't earn your feelings, it manufactures them. Great films trust their audience. They show you a moment and let you interpret it. Shawshank doesn't trust you, so it does all the work for you. The music tells you when to be hopeful. The narration tells you what the scene means. It's emotional manipulation disguised as depth. Let's break down the opera scene. Andy plays an Italian opera record over the prison loudspeakers. Suddenly, every single inmate stops. Hardened criminals stand frozen, tears in their eyes, moved by sopranos singing in a language none of them understand. You're supposed to feel transcendence, the power of art. But here's what you should actually feel: confusion. You're telling me convicted murderers in 1960s Maine are having a spiritual awakening because of Italian opera? They don't understand the words. Most don't even know what opera is. One viewer called it completely insipid with a capital I, so over the top and patently ridiculous. It's not emotional storytelling, it's emotional extortion. Then there's the rooftop beer scene. Andy risks his life approaching psychotic Captain Hadley to offer tax advice. Instead of getting beaten to death, he negotiates beer privileges. Golden hour moment. Guys on a roof, drinking beers, laughing while Red's narration tells us Andy did it to feel free. It's supposed to be heartwarming, but it's also a Miller Lite commercial disguised as drama. This is maximum security. These guards beat inmates for sport. But Andy sweet talks them into a beer party? The scene only works if you don't think about it. Compare this to actual great films. In The Godfather, when Michael closes the door on Kay, there's no music, no narration, just a door closing. You feel the tragedy because the film trusts you. In Schindler's List, when Schindler breaks down saying,
I could have gone one more person, and I didn't.
the horror has been so established that the moment destroys you. It's earned. Shawshank earns nothing. It just plays the hits and hopes you confuse manipulation for meaning. Once you notice the strings, you can't unsee them. And Shawshank's strings aren't even hidden. They're neon. Every frame is calculated to make you feel warm without challenging you to think. It's not cinema. It's emotional fast food. Even great films can have plot holes. Shawshank doesn't just have nitpicks. It has structural problems that require you to accept the universe itself is conspiring to give Andy a happy ending. Let's start with the poster. Andy spends 19 years digging a tunnel, hiding it behind posters. When he escapes, he crawls through head first. But here's the problem. How did he reattach the poster from inside the tunnel? He couldn't reach back. He couldn't see what he was doing. Yet it's shown perfectly smooth the next morning. It's a logic gap that reveals this story cares more about the idea of escape than the reality. Andy's plan requires a thunderstorm on the exact night he breaks out, and conveniently, one hits. What if it had been clear? What if the storm came a week later? The film doesn't address this because Andy's plan has to work. The plot demands it. Then the aftermath, where the film fully embraces fairy tale logic. Andy created a fake identity with birth certificate, driver's license, social security number in the 1960s, before computers. He made multiple trips to banks around Maine without anyone noticing an inmate walking around in civilian clothes. The ending is an absurd string of coincidences. Andy leaves Red a letter under a specific rock in a specific field under a specific tree, in a state the size of Maine. Red finds it on the first try. When Red is paroled, he's sent to a halfway house in the same town where Brooks lived. Not just the same town, the same building, the exact same room. One reviewer called this intolerably cheesy, and they're right. Then, the final miracle. Red finds the rock, finds the money, violates parole to travel to Mexico, and finds Andy on a beach. On the first try, in an entire country. But here's what makes it worse. Stephen King's original novella was smarter than the movie. It didn't end on that beach. It ended with Red on a bus, staring at the horizon and saying, "I hope." That was the point. The redemption was the internal shift, the radical choice to keep going despite the uncertainty. But Hollywood couldn't handle "I hope." They needed "I see." By showing us the reunion, the movie kills the very theme it spent 2 hours building. It turns hope from a dangerous spiritual act into a literal lottery ticket that pays out in the final 5 minutes. We call this predatory sentimentality. It's an unearned win. It lets you forget that Brooks committed suicide, that Tommy was murdered, that Andy spent 20 years in hell. All of that trauma is wiped away by an aerial shot of a boat. Masterpieces like The 400 Blows or No Country for Old Men understand that real life doesn't always give you a beach. But Shawshank isn't about real life. It's about making sure you never have to question the system, as long as the good guys get to retire in Mexico. So after all of this, after the sanitized prison, the emotional manipulation, the cardboard characters, the fairy tale ending, we circle back to the original question. How did this movie become #1 on IMDb? Here's the uncomfortable truth. It's #1 because it's easy, not because it's great. Because it's the most inoffensive, easily digestible, crowd-pleasing piece of inspirational content ever packaged as cinema. It asks nothing of you. It challenges nothing. It just makes you feel warm and hopeful. Let's get perspective. Shawshank wasn't even the best movie of 1994. It lost Best Picture to Forrest Gump. And Pulp Fiction revolutionized cinema that year in a way Shawshank never did. Tarantino changed how stories could be told. He influenced an entire generation of filmmakers. Shawshank influenced people to say, "Get busy living" or "Get busy dying" at motivational seminars. The film also bombed at the box office. 28 million domestic against a 25 million budget. It was a financial failure. Critics were mixed. Roger Ebert gave it 3 stars. It only became beloved years later through cable TV reruns. So how did it climb to #1? Because IMDb ratings aren't about greatness. They're about likability. And Shawshank is the most likable movie ever made. It's universally accessible. No violence that's too disturbing, no themes too complex, no moral ambiguity that makes you uncomfortable. It's rated R, but it's really PG-13 in spirit. Safe, designed for maximum appeal. And that's fine, but let's be honest about what this is. Shawshank is not the greatest film ever made. It's the film that makes the most people feel good. And we've confused those two things. It's the participation trophy of cinema. Beloved not because it's the best, but because it's the easiest to love. Because clicking 10 out of 10 on Shawshank is easy. It made you feel something. You walked away inspired. But feeling something doesn't make a film great. If that were the metric, The Notebook would be in the top 10. Greatness requires more than making you feel good. It requires craft, complexity, risk, vision. It requires saying something true about the human condition, even when that truth is uncomfortable. Shawshank says the world is fair if you're patient and good. That hope always wins. That friendship conquers all. Beautiful lies. But still lies. The greatest films tell harder truths. They show us the world as it is, not as we wish it were. But here's what's actually happening. The Shawshank Redemption isn't a bad movie. It's a perfectly competent, well-acted, beautifully shot piece of feel-good entertainment. The problem isn't that it exists. The problem is what we've turned it into. We've elevated comfort above complexity. We've mistaken inspiration for insight. We've convinced ourselves that a movie that makes us feel good is the same thing as a movie that's actually great. And those are not the same thing. Shawshank is therapy disguised as cinema. It's designed to make you believe the world is fundamentally just, that good people eventually win, that hope can overcome any obstacle. These are beautiful ideas. They're also fantasy. Real prison is not a place where you build libraries and drink beers on rooftops. Real injustice doesn't always get corrected. Real evil isn't always punished. Real hope is fragile and often misplaced. But we don't want to watch that. We want to watch Andy Dufresne crawl through shit and come out clean on the other side. The Shawshank Redemption gives us that. And there's nothing wrong with wanting it. But let's stop pretending it's the greatest film ever made. The Godfather doesn't comfort you. It implicates you in the violence and moral compromise of the American dream. Schindler's List doesn't inspire you. It traumatizes you with the depths of human cruelty. There Will Be Blood doesn't give you hope. It shows you ambition devouring everything until there's nothing left but a hollowed-out man. Those films are great because they tell hard truths, because they show us things we'd rather not see, because they challenge our assumptions about morality and justice. Shawshank tells us what we already want to believe. That's not challenge, that's validation. And validation is not the same as greatness. So yes, I rewatched The Shawshank Redemption 3 times for this video. I read Stephen King's original novella. I watched actual prison documentaries to compare. And every single time, I came away with the same thought. This is fine. Just fine. It's a well-made, emotionally manipulative, thematically shallow piece of feel-good entertainment that somehow convinced the world it was a masterpiece. And the craziest part? I'm not even mad about it. I'm just tired of pretending. Tired of nodding along when someone says it's the greatest film ever made. Tired of acting like comfort food and haute cuisine are the same thing. So here's to The Shawshank Redemption. The movie that convinced a generation that prison is bearable, that hope is easy, that good always triumphs, and that Morgan Freeman's voice can fix anything. It's not the greatest film ever made, but it might be the most successful con job in cinema history. Remember that IMDb ranking I showed you at the start? Number 1 for 25 years and counting. Still think it's earned? Or did I just ruin your comfort movie? Look, I get it. Maybe you still love this movie. Maybe you think I'm a heartless cynic who doesn't understand the power of hope. And you know what? That's exactly what the comment section is for. Drop a comment and tell me where I'm wrong. Defend your comfort movie. Tell me why the beach ending is actually earned, why the opera scene makes perfect sense, why Andy's poster physics work just fine. Or better yet, tell me which untouchable sacred cow I should take down next. Because apparently, someone needs to say what everyone's thinking, but too afraid to admit. If you want me to tear down more untouchable movies with the same forensic honesty, the same refusal to pretend comfort equals greatness, hit that subscribe button. Because I'm done nodding along to movies that don't deserve their reputation. I'm done pretending this is cinema's peak just because questioning it makes you the bad guy. The number 1 movie is a lie. The masterpiece is a myth. And The Shawshank Redemption is just a really pretty fairy tale with an R rating.